Good morning, 94.5.
Morning, Staff Sergeant. Staff Sergeant.
We now know that meteors will land off the coast of different cities.
At this point, there are many more questions than answers.
Los Angeles, rated PG-13.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kulturecast. I am your host, Chris Stachiw, and I am joined by my good friend. We spend a lot of time talking about films, and I have enjoyed every single minute of it. He's a professor over there at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas. Your friend and mine, Dr. David D. Perlmutter. Put the D in that name, folks.
Thank you very much, Chris. Glad to join you again for another excursion at the possible end of the world.
I know. God, they love the end of the world in cinema. And boy, they love aliens causing the end of the world. On this episode of the Kulturecast, Dr. Perlmutter and I will be talking about a film that many of you probably forgot existed. We're going to be talking about 2011's Battle Los Angeles. The film is directed by Jonathan Liebesman, written by Chris Bertolini, stars Aaron Eckhart, Michelle Rodriguez, Ramon Rodriguez, Bridget Moynihan, Neo, yes, the singer-songwriter Neo, and Michael Pena. Pre-becoming famous or popular Michael Pena, I think when I was watching the film with my friend Lindsay, she goes, "Oh, it's that guy. What do I know him from?" And I was like, at this point, a lot of stuff. Then, not much. Dr. Perlmutter, I'm very curious. Two-part question. Why are we talking about Battle for Los Angeles? And also, is it rather apropos that we're talking about Battle for Los Angeles within about a week and a half of Steven Spielberg's return to alien cinema with Disclosure Day, a film also about aliens, maybe not as bloodthirsty, but aliens nonetheless?
Well, I suggested this film because I felt it was a well-done example of a genre that you think can't be well done anymore because we've seen so many variations of it. And let's just take one example here, Aliens, right? So I'm old enough, I get to say that once for a podcast, I'm old enough to have seen 70s films, 80s films. I read science fiction that was from the 30s and 40s. I watched Star Trek. I watched other science fiction television shows. I have probably physically read descriptions of and seen visions of artistic, cinematic, painting, whatever, visions of what aliens could look like, creatures from other planets, thousands of times, if you just count them all. And so you got to come up with something a little bit different, something of interest to get me to say like, oh, that's a little bit original take on an alien. And then alien invasion. Again, that was a pretty popular genre in the 50s and 60s. You got to come up with something to jar me and go like, okay, there's some implausibilities, there's some suspension of disbelief, but that's a pretty good invasion as invasions go. And I felt that this film checked boxes of doing some little things right. And I just wanted to give you one example of a little thing where I went like, yes, that was very clever of them to do that. Is that part of the conceit of this film, which is discussed quite often, is that the aliens don't have tremendous air power. I mean, we live in an era where obviously air power is very important in warfare, whether it's drone warfare. And this film was, by the way, one of the very first ones to deal with drones. I thought that was very interesting. It's talk about a prescient movie, right?
Very ahead of its time in 2011.
Yeah. But they do have fine craft. And the producers sat there, which I don't think was done on a certain other major blockbuster film that you just mentioned. But I think the producers of this film, the director of this film, the screenwriter, they sat there and they go like, we want to have alien craft that fly around and engage in the Battle of Los Angeles. We just can't have a Star Trek shuttle. We can't have a UFO. We got to have something just different about them. And I felt they're little puffs, they're little burst spurts where they weren't just one continuous jet. They were sort of, I don't even know them. Of course, it's never explained, but it shouldn't. There shouldn't be any scene like, oh, yes, they use this for propulsion or whatever. But I just thought that was a little touch that maybe go like, oh, those are different than alien earthbound aerial spacecraft that I've ever seen before in a movie. And I think it just does a number of those. And then the last part is I'm I'm a sucker for a platoon film, for a squad film, for a film which shows war through the eyes of a small unit, a band of brothers. And the original idea of the film, and this is like, I was reading about the conception of the film, was that like we would do an alien invasion, but at the squad level, like just five or six guys, 10 or 12 men and women in the military and their battle. And in the beginning of the film, we do have like news broadcasts, but after that, there's basically no, cut to the Pentagon where people are screaming over gigantic screens where the president of Serbia is discussing with the president of the United States. This is just at the ground level. I liked it, which I don't like to showcase as something of relevance or importance, but I liked those little elements, and the story that it told wasn't pretentious film. We can learn a lot from it as a genre film.
I saw this in theaters with a friend of mine, and he and I sat, and I remember watched this movie, and I can't exactly remember off the top of my head because a lot has happened and been smoked since then, and I just don't necessarily have the capacity to remember how I walked away from 2011's Battle Los Angeles feeling. So all I can comment on, and this is, pre-podcast, obviously, this is 2011. So I started the podcast 3 years later, which is crazy to think about in and of itself. So having only been podcasting for 3 years at that point, I never returned to this movie. I actually, in a lot of ways, sometimes forget that this movie existed. And I think a lot of people have as well, which is, I think, to your kind of initial statements and thesis on the movie, I think it does do a very good job at something that wasn't really being done at the time then with this genre. In a lot of ways, still really hasn't been done now with this genre, but where it's successful, it's really successful. Where it is a failure, I think it's an obvious and abject failure. And I think a lot of that comes from leaning into tropes, like hard, really hard, to the point where we have like a group of characters that's bound to die. The dad who's going to sacrifice, like a lot of the stuff that just and like you said, you use the term, you're a sucker for like a good like squad movie. Like those are those tropes that they mine. And for me, that is probably not like the least successful part, but it's the part where I'm like, I'm not a huge war movie guy because they tend to go and lean into those tropes. And here, when they do them, I'm just like, hey, movie, we couldn't have done anything else. But I understand that also the intention of every filmmaker is not to make the newest, most exciting, most unique, creative thing ever made. Sometimes tropes are used because they are easy to use and they are not expected to be something difficult for you to lean into because everybody else has done them, and everybody else doing them is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not also necessarily a good thing. For some people, it's going to work. For other people, it's not going to work. I can understand that I am not in the majority of film watchers sitting here and going, well, this is just like this, and this is just like this, and this is just like this. Not everybody's doing that. Let's just get that out of the way. I'm doing that because I sit and watch movies all the time. One might even say for a living. So if that's what I'm doing, then the expectation is I am watching for the tropes all the time. And I think that film reviewers lose sight of that from time to time. All the tropes are in this movie. Yeah, and you know what? Plenty of people enjoy the tropes, either because they don't watch enough films to have been inundated with it constantly, or because those tropes just don't bother them because that's the expectation of the genre. And if it's not in the genre, some people are wondering where those things are, as opposed to saying, well, here it's, third act, so the dad's got to die. James Bond movies worked because they were formulaic and expectational in a way. And I think that that's a very obvious case study for, well, can you make a movie that leans into the tropes and be successful? Yes, James Bond is one of those franchises where it's like, look, it's for 30 years, it did the same thing. It started finally bristling under the auteurs coming in and making the movies. And all of a sudden it was, we don't want to do this anymore. And you know what? I agree. Some of the things are necessary to no longer exist, but plenty of the things still work. So all of that out of the way to say, I think this movie works better at times than it fails at times. But I will say, for someone who's not a war movie guy at all, it does have a lot of those war or war movie tropes. But again, in this film's benefit, again, for me personally, not a fan, but for this film's benefit, I think it helps really ground it in, at the time, a post 9/11 current Iraq war timeline, post Black Hawk Down film timeline, the film Black Hawk Down, not the event, but the film Black Hawk Down, because you can see a lot of Black Hawk Down in this movie. You can see a lot of 9/11 imagery in this movie. I mean, again, to go to Steven Spielberg, War of the Worlds was his 9/11 movie. It really was. Like, it is a lot of like 9/11 imagery. You got Tom Cruise running around the streets covered in dust. If that for a certain age of person doesn't evoke a certain kind of imagery, don't know what to tell you. For most people who grew up and were able to see those 9/11 images, seeing Tom Cruise running around in dust, covered in dust in War of the Worlds is a very close approximation to that. We don't have any imagery of American soldiers fighting on the front lines of our country against a foreign invader. That has never happened in our lifetime. Fingers crossed it never will. This movie, I think, is a very interesting observation on what it would look like if the invaders were not of another country, but of another species exterior to our planet. I think that this is a very interesting kind of take on that as a genre. I will say, having a bunch of cookie cutter characters, again, in this context works because it's not really about the characters as much as the situation that they've been thrown into and experiencing the horror of the situation through their eyes. So every character is a rather broad beat, as it were, or a broad stroke. And look, something like Odyssey coming out here in a couple weeks, I think is once again a good indicator of something like that, where its complexity of characters doesn't necessarily matter if the situation and the characters are drawn very broadly. Complex characters tend to get lost in this complex structure that some film writers want to go with. This film is aliens are invading and we're following a platoon in Los Angeles. It doesn't need to be any more than that. And the fact that it's not is not necessarily a bad thing. I think for this film, it kind of works, but I understand how, and this, I include myself in this group, some people would watch this movie and go, you're not doing enough. I fall into the camp of you're not doing enough because this is such a novel premise that nobody's really done anything with since, that it kind of blows my mind that this is the only one of these movies we have, and that it wasn't a prototype for someone to do something else with it. This is kind of where that idea stopped and started, and that's shocking for me because this idea seems really ripe for repeat or re-examination in a big budget capacity. Because again, that's the other thing. This is a big budget Hollywood movie. There were other movies that came out that ripped this movie off, specifically Battle of Los Angeles, which is the asylum film of the more or less identical name. But nobody's even done this since, which that kind of, for me, kind of makes this movie just a tad more frustrating because it's like this movie's a lot of wasted potential in a lot of ways for someone who wanted more than just a battle movie in Los Angeles. And if it had inspired someone else to do more with it, I think you'd look back at this movie as like, well, this is a fun starting point, but it's like a fun starting and stop point. And that's maybe in 2026, the biggest knock against this movie is that it didn't inspire more things. It kind of just exists singularly as its own thing. There's not even a sequel to this movie, which is, again, shocking because the movie made a lot of money, like 3 times its budget, which, looking at something like Mandalorian and Grogu right now, barely breaking even, like this movie was a success, like a real bona fide success. No sequel.
It was a success. And I mean, I just looked up, I really didn't know until we were going to do this show. I looked it up. It cost, about, I think in those dollars, it cost about a third of what it eventually made, which is good, right? Like half times you have to there. And it had Aaron Eckhart was not, and still is not, like, he's not Tom Cruise. I mean, I actually think he's a very good actor.
I love Aaron Eckhart.
Love the fact that he was born in America but raised in England, and his accent. I'm always really impressed by those British actors who can play somebody, and we have to look it up to find out that they're British. You can't tell or that they have, they were raised in Britain in his case, but didn't have any star power in terms of the director, the screenwriter, anyone associated with it to like have a box office star. I think that needs to be pointed out. I mean, I have nothing against Steven Spielberg, but obviously when a Steven Spielberg movie opens, there's a pre-built-in audience. And we've discussed now whether there's any stars left. I mean, Tom Cruise can still, I think, although I guess one of the Mission Impossible movies was an exception, can guarantee a certain amount of people showing up. Is there anyone left in Hollywood besides importing BTS from Korea to be in a movie that, or doing a movie about Michael Jackson, celebrities of yesteryear who are passed away, that can guarantee an opening. So I said it is interesting how successful the movie was despite not having anything except just the story. And let me go back to it. If I'll go into professor mode for a moment. There are a couple of things here which I like because they brought out some of the issues that whenever I watch a war film or I watch a post-apocalyptic film, I think I like them as examples to talk about because they bring out the essentialism of human nature. It's life or death. It's not where should we go for dinner. It's not it's not even a career choice. What should I major in college? This is the extermination of the human race or not. Right. This is surviving the apocalypse or not. Right. And post-apocalyptic films, war films, especially at the squad level. I mean, you could you're watching Band of Brothers or The Pacific, or they just did the Masters of the Air series, and you're going like, yes, we know ahead of time the plot turns out America wins World War II, but that doesn't mean this squad is going to survive, right? So we are still, unless we've read the book, wondering what's going to happen. And so that to me is that essentialism of not knowing. I mean, yes, probably I should be quicker on the uptake, and a cute kid is rescued with his father. It's not going to be the cute kid that dies at the end.
No,
actually sacrificing himself for his father. I did like that they didn't do other things. Like, for example, there is no love story. Right. There's no divorced wife and kid.
Thankfully.
That Aaron Eckhart has to prove himself to by
or go and save. Yeah. Oh yeah. My God. Can you imagine how insufferable that would have been?
Yeah. There's a great, strong, intelligent female character who's a veterinarian. Right. And that proves to be interesting, the part of the plot of the film, that she can, do an autopsy of a non-human animal. But and there's a moment there where you think okay, after the movie is over, maybe they'll get together or something like that. But there's no love story there. There's no oh, kiss me, it's the end, moment. So I approve of that choice. I think that was a very, very smart choice to do. And so a lot of the tropes were familiar, but they were acceptable within the stream. I'll bring up one more thing that I think war films bring up, and it was a little heavy-handed at times. If I were editing this film, I'd have one less scene of somebody saying what the moral of a moment is. But Aaron Eckhart plays a sergeant, and traditionally in the military, probably going back to Roman times, the sergeants were the career professionals who were highly experienced, and he plays a highly experienced career sergeant, and the lieutenants, like the lieutenant here, who Lieutenant William Martinez played, Second Lieutenant William Martinez, he plays a new officer fresh out of West Point, fresh out of ROTC, right? And that is a familiar thing. The grizzled sergeant who sort of has practical knowledge versus the brash new lieutenant who thinks they know everything because they came out of the military academy. I think they do that well. And especially with the issue, and I know this is, I guess it's a little bit familiar of something happened in the previous war and people are mad about it. And
right. That's a hell of a trope. My brother was in that platoon, and he didn't come back and you did. It's oh, yeah.
That I might have, but it gets to this really good scene, which I think, as somebody who spent my time in leadership, I thought a lot about leadership and I read a lot about leadership. And obviously, academic leadership or corporate leadership and military leadership are not all the same. However, that moment where the sergeant is explaining to the young lieutenant, you're paid to make a decision. It isn't always necessarily going to be the right decision. Go right, go left. You're paid to do something. And it may turn out to be wrong. You may have had all the right reasons and end up doing the wrong thing, but that's an element of leadership. And I thought that was an interesting takeaway. That was an intelligent takeaway from the plot of a movie that, the audience could go okay, I see something emerging from character there that is not just cardboard cutout.
Right. I would agree. I think that that's one of the scenes in the movie that really resonated with me when they were kind of taking him to task and he starts repeating their names and their tag numbers. Like look, it's like it's from a million other war movies in some capacity or another, because we've seen that trope before. It's been used before. But again, here it works. And I think it's, again, like, I was looking at, as we were sitting here, I was looking and thinking to myself, like, Aaron Eckhart, huh? Like, what happened, man? Like, not to him as an actor, but why did he not, like, you're in a movie that makes 3 times its budget. You're the lead actor in it. This is coming 3 years after, and, you tell me the most obvious thing you know him from, because for me, while he is in one of my favorite movies, which is Thank You for Smoking, where he plays Nick Naylor, which I think is, for me, my favorite thing I've seen him in, obviously. He's in The Dark Knight, which is the thing that I think most people know him for or from because of the Chris Nolan of it all. And then it should have been this. I mean, 3 years after that film came out, he's the lead in a big budget summer blockbuster. Because this is a summer blockbuster. I saw it over the summer. It's a $70 million war movie, but it's a sci-fi war movie. So it's meant to have broad cross-genre appeal to people outside of just I would not have gone and seen this movie in theaters if it had just been a war movie. Maybe the Battle for Los Angeles of it all, the like alternate history of it all, would have been the only way to get me into it. But a war movie broadly is not something I'm into. So when I think about Aaron Eckhart, like, he's been in 2 genre films that are not specifically the genre they're made for, because The Dark Knight is also it's not really a superhero movie. I can't really stand that movie or the sequel. Like, I would say The Dark Knight's better than the sequel, and the sequel is just intolerable in a way that's hard to really put into words. Other than if you want to hear the projection booth episode I did with Mike White last year, where we talked about it for like 2.5 hours and went into every single nuance as to why I can't stand that movie. And I don't say that about a lot of things, but Aaron Eckhart, for me, is an actor who, looking at his career since Battle Los Angeles, why has he been treated like a Bruce Willis or Steven Seagal post the 90s?
Yeah, I want to, sorry to interrupt, but like, I realized when we were going to be doing this that, like, gosh, I haven't seen that many Aaron Eckhart movies. So I looked up his filmography, and I had not heard of almost every single movie he'd done since this movie.
It's wild, right?
I mean, please don't call and yell at me if you're Aaron Eckhart's agent, but I was thinking, like, the week after, I mean, this opened pretty well. I mean, it said opening weekend, when I was looking this up, of $40 million in 2011, which is probably, I don't know, 100 million, 80 million today.
It's probably would be like somewhere in the ballpark of like 50 to 60 today, I would assume.
Yeah, which is, again, for a movie that didn't cost the equivalent of 300 million or 400 million or $1 billion or whatever. So I think that is an interesting question. That's where a panel of people would say, like, why is it there's some people who are, because in every movie I've ever seen him, every television show, he's an excellent actor. Yeah. He's not like a genre actor or a heroic actor who can only appear as a star. Like, he's played minor parts and or walk-on parts and done very well on them. So that is an interesting mystery. In this film, for people who haven't seen it yet, one of my distinguishers of an actor is, as we've talked about before, is I believe that there are facial actors, there are torso actors, and there are full body actors, right? There are some people who can look at the camera and they can speak and they can act well with their voice and their eyes. That's it. There are some people who, like, above the chest, with their hands, they can do something interesting. But then there are people, and I think Aaron Eckhart is one of those people, who, like, you see him sitting, right? Like, I was watching a couple of the scenes here where he's just sitting and he's putting ammunition in his rifle, or he's making an offhand comment. And I was thinking, his knees are acting, right? His boots are acting. His stance is a good acting stance. And so I was remembering that, gosh, I'm so impressed with him. I don't think I said at the time, 2011, like, A Star is Born, because he doesn't have, I don't want to say he doesn't have charisma, but he doesn't have that kind of thing of, like, he's not a classical leading man facially or in body type. I mean, you don't
think he looks facially like a classic leading? I think it's, for me, it's the chin. I think his chin,
just a little
chin
bit
though, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, like, I don't think he's classic. He's 100% classic. Pretty boy, handsome. Again, where you see them on a beach in Malibu and like cast them in a movie or something like that. I don't know. I don't have any explanation except he's a very good actor.
He really is.
But you look at his filmography and like 3 years go by and he's not in anything. And then maybe a personal choice. I don't know his biography. Aaron, please call me. Let's talk. If you want to. But in this movie, he is totally credible as this sort of getting physically beat up, tired sergeant that he's given his life for his country in terms of like he doesn't have again. There's no backstory of. God, I was thinking of all the Roland Emmerich films where the lead character is a divorced guy and his wife is and now with a billionaire.
You're just describing like all the disaster movies that he made. What was the Rock story versus what was Will Smith's story in Independence Day? Oh my God.
Yeah, just I appreciate where this film didn't go as well as where it went. And this is something, again, we talk about a lot about, like, you got to give credit for the decisions that are made not to do something as well as the decisions to do something in a film.
It gets to the action of the aliens invading 13 minutes into the movie. It's around the 15-minute mark in a 2-hour movie that we get the alien. And I think that, to your point, that's really smart, because if the advertising is, look at the aliens invading Los Angeles, I don't need a half an hour of the matriculations and gestations and all the nonsense that's going on between all the people here. I don't care if someone's getting promoted. I don't care if somebody's not part of the crew anymore. I don't need any of that. I mean, frankly, if you had started the film with, that shot that they showed in the trailer for the first Star Wars sequel, where it's like the light flashing on everybody's faces as they're coming into, from Camp Pendleton or wherever on a helicopter in, and you see like the lights flashing of the shots that are being shot at the helicopter at night, something like that. Even just having the movie open and media res, I don't know if I even need as much characterization as they give us for some of the characters, because if you want this to be we're just following grunts, I don't know how much characterization I really need, other than like quips or pithy dialogue or something, a minor characterization. But to your point, like, sometimes the characterization, the over characterization gets in the way, because some of these characters, like, don't give me a characterization of a character that's just going to get blown up on a helicopter. Because like, you as a movie clearly don't care. I, as the audience, also shouldn't care. Some of the characters we know are just going to be there to die, to raise the stakes of the movie. I think they place the importance properly where it needs to be. I don't know if I will ever vibe with the acting stylings of one Neo, because again, like, him being in the movie is more of a distraction, because I know him more as a singer-songwriter, not as a actor, and I don't think the world knows him as an actor, but he's in this movie. I know that much.
I think every disaster film has to have one hip-hop or K-pop star. We're going to do Battleship at some point, right?
Good night. Good. I really say you could literally do the film that Neo was in next year. I don't know if you saw it in theaters, but I did. I went and saw Red Tails in theaters, which just...
No, I did not. No, but I saw that there. So one thing you're mentioning, which I think is interesting. So I'll tell a little secondhand war story. So my father was in the Navy, and he was a lieutenant, a junior grade engineering officer on a Fletcher class destroyer, World War II destroyer. And he didn't, like a lot of people from his generation, he did not tell a lot of war stories. Like, I have like none, but he did pass on some things that he learned and observed. And he told the story of how his first day on the ship, and he and the other officers of lower rank were meeting with the captain, and there were 2 or 3 young officers, including my father, who were just their first day on the ship. And the captain said, "This is a U.S. naval ship. We must operate unquestionably as a team. No one gets to be a free thinker or independent. We must operate as a team. That's the ship is built to do that. However, never let me catch any of you forgetting that every single sailor on this ship, everybody who salutes you, has a family that cares about them and wants to see them come home. That doesn't mean that we might not have to sacrifice them. That doesn't mean that we might not need to sacrifice our entire ship, because, of course, my father was in the Atlantic, escorting convoys and hunting U-boats, but destroyers were supposed to take the first hits. They were supposed to protect capital ships, especially if he'd been transferred to the Pacific, which I think I told this story. But the point was that I do like stories where we get enough characterization to care.
Right.
Right. And I know, I've never made a war film myself, but I know there must be a balance, because you can't have 2 hours of exposition to learn the life story of everybody, right? And then there's a battle for 5 minutes at the end. People aren't going to watch that film. And you don't need it. You don't need it. But I felt that we had enough to okay, there's these conflicts, these drama, boom, the war begins. They have to work together or it's all over.
And I am with you. I think if the film or TV show or what have you is willing to go along with the idea that, like you said, sometimes I don't need any more than just they are human beings. That's it. I don't know if I need more than that. Frankly, if the movie had leaned more into the realism of it all, I mean, that's the other thing. And I wanted to kind of ask you about this because, you have a rather well-known book about, war and how film and media portrays war and perceives war. I almost feel like the film would have benefited more from being a little bit, I wouldn't say more realistic, but and again, not requiring it be R-rated, but I think you kind of maybe get what I'm getting at, where it's I maybe wanted the film to lean into the Black Hawk Down of it a little bit. And again, maybe that's the wrong sentiment here. Maybe I'm coming from the wrong place. But for me, I feel like it just, if we're going to go with as little characterization as possible, and we're going to have, again, just aliens, literal aliens, not a representation of aliens, but a literal alien running around or aliens running around, maybe have the dichotomy between the two be even starker and have it be this super realistic, hard-hitting, really Black Hawk Down, people being not eviscerated, but again, the stakes are really ratcheted up. It does feel in a way like the stakes in this movie don't match kind of what they want from it, which is this to be a somewhat serious adjacent war film, or at least taking it seriously. Because again, it's taking it seriously. Like we said, there's not a whole lot of fun in this movie. There's a part where they're effectively torturing an alien with knives and poking it while they're doing an autopsy on it, which is this movie's Black Hawk Down leg surgery moment. I get it, but I kind of weirdly enough wanted more.
That was an interesting decision. They decided not to have a character say, wait a minute, we're not obeying the Geneva Convention in terms of prisoners, or wait a minute, these people have feelings too. There's no, that was an interesting decision that they didn't do that trope, right? Of having the moralistic argument. These aliens are here. They're here to apparently exterminate us. No rules.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is very smart, right? I think that gives you an idea of what the tension or the expectation should be. But I do think, again, I just wish there had been a little bit more of a sense of, not again realism, but a sense of realistic stakes. And I think the movie just doesn't necessarily get there. And I will also say probably, and this is maybe the biggest knock against this movie, did we need this to be, like you've already mentioned, Independence Day at the end, where all of a sudden they know how to fix the entire invasion? That for me is what probably draws me out of this the most. And it's, again, leans back into in Black Hawk Down, these are just the point of this story was the Black Hawk Down event was only these soldiers. In this, it's this didn't have to be a bunch of these dudes, effectively white saviors at some point, because again, we do have Aaron Eckhart being one of the people that survives. Somehow being able to stop the entire invasion is what the implication is. And I don't know if it's meant to be just a platoon of dudes taking on alien threats that are incoming. The implication should have been, and I think Cloverfield does it better than this movie does, which is making it feel like you are but a blip on the map of a greater conflict. This takes away from that in a way by having it be, well, they know how to, the information you figured out has been transmitted across the globe, and we're going to figure out how to take them on. Like, don't do that. Like, the movie's about to end. Don't do that.
There are parts, and that's one of them, that if I were doing an edit, I would say, is that necessary, right? And it's interesting to me because you've said this independent of me being on your show, but like you've talked about the second act problem and the third act problem. Like it seems to be, there's a much higher likelihood you're watching a movie and you're going like, I thought that was a great first act. Like, that was a great start to the movie. Like, oh, wow, what's an interesting plot. And then nothing happens in the second act, and then there's a big action resolution in the third act. And I think I've described, unfortunately, a lot of big so-called blockbuster, superhero or sci-fi blockbuster films where they just like rattle around for the middle third of the film, and then there's a big climax that they spent half the budget on there. This is first of all, this is the U.S. Army. It took a long time for them to do this, like, hundreds of years. But like the U.S. Army was one of the first institutions in America to integrate. It's an interesting history there that the U.S. Army mostly integrated long before America did. And this is a diverse, multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic group. I think that's important. Just a little bit, almost like adjacent to the movie Glory, about like people coming together for an external threat, that is to all of humanity, not just in any individual group with all the divisions that we have. I do think that they try to have some things like let's go back to the alien autopsy. They discover, and again, I do not. I've read a lot of science fiction, and I'm getting old. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but that thing where the alien weapons are fused to their body, and I was going to myself like, I don't think I've seen that before or read that before, and I've read a heck of a lot of science fiction. It's a little bit silly, as in like, really, like, what if they need to upgrade?
Right.
Hey, I got some good news and some bad news. We invented a new laser rifle. We're going to have to chop your arms off so that we can, install. But, it was an attempt to do something interesting. And I love the character, probably by Eckhart, to talk about commitment to cause. And I thought that was very interesting. About like these are Marines, and they're from a particular unit, and they tell this little backstory about retreat hell. We just got here from World War I. It's the true story, and but then they confront these alien soldiers who are like all the I want to say positive, but like all the like useful for the job traits of a soldier, but none of the humanity.
Right.
None of the nuance of like having a human being as a soul, because you don't want automatons. I mean, I really don't want AI controlling missile hits and things like that. I want some accountable human and somebody to make a decision. So I thought it tried. Again, neither of us are claiming this is like the perfect movie. I just felt some of the decisions of what not to do and some of the decisions to do worked for the general. It's a squad level alien invasion movie.
I think, and you mentioned the design of the aliens. So I would say that maybe the closest thing that we get or have at the time is a more kind of Cenobite-ish, like humans fused with mechanical from like Hellraiser, or even, I mean, again, to go to like H.R. Giger and the xenomorph from Alien. The xenomorph from Alien was somewhat biomechanical, and here it's like biomechanical, but in a way that's, like you said, like military adjacent. So they have like guns and other things fused into their body, and I like the creativity behind it. It's very Quake 4. In that game, there's the Strogg, and they're kind of these human mechanical amalgamations, and it's similar to this. I mean, you have a chain gun on your right arm where your arm used to be like that. Like you said, the resolve of someone to go to that length to become a mutant monster like that is just, to understand what their civilization is. I mean, we don't need any characterization of the alien. We literally don't need to know them as anything other than the invading force who is here to take the resources. That's it. We don't need to see them as anything else. And I think it's smart that the film doesn't offer us any nuance. in that regard, because in a situation like this, where, like you said, there's a Geneva Convention with these aliens, the expectation is they're an invading force and we are fighting for our lives. The end. That's it. The expectation is kill or be killed. That seems to be the expectation. There are no rules of engagement. No one is saying, you go quiet now. Go hot.
Yeah,
There's none of that.
Sorry, Trevor, but I was thinking of the bad tropes they could have done. Like I was when I first watched this movie, I had some expectations of mistakes. Of things I would disagree with, and one of them was they did not have. I really expected this to happen. I was shocked it didn't happen. I was happy it didn't happen. They didn't kill an alien and find a picture of a wife alien and a baby alien on it, like 3D hologram from Star Wars or something like that. They go like, oh man, these aliens are just like us. They've got, wife and kids at home and they think they're fighting. I mean, that would have been indescribably squeamish. And that's not the right word, like indescribably like, oh my God, really Hollywood, please don't do that. And they didn't, God bless them, they didn't do it.
And I'm glad they didn't, because again, like we don't even really get that from the human beings either, which is also good. Like it's not needed. And again, like I want to ask you about this, because again, to think about the post 9/11 of this all, right? And like the post that landscape in American cinematic history, in American media, in American culture, this film is in a lot of ways like a response to the Iraq War and the images people were seeing on the TV every day. And while we never saw that in the community of Los Angeles, there were people that were seeing that in their literal backyards on their television in Iraq. Anyone who could see something like that would have seen those images of American soldiers in their country. We were seeing it in another country, American soldiers. So it's interesting to have that kind of put here into our country. I just don't know if they do anything with that or have anything to say. And I'm not sure that the intention is to make something with something to say. But I'm just curious, like, if you're going to do this movie, and no one else has really done this movie since, with at least just like straight up. I mean, I guess maybe the closest is that Edge of Tomorrow film with Tom Cruise. But again, like there's a different hook there. Like the hook of that movie is time.
Destroy Paris. They're not,
right. So like, yeah. I guess like I just don't know. Like
so many films, right? When in so many films, let's just say the Roland Emmerich films, right? Where we and you've talked about this again, independently of me, but I think you and I have talked about this before too. Like the Roland Emmerich world destruction montage, where you see Paris, and of course everybody in Paris wears a striped mime shirt and has a beret and has a baguette under their arm. And then you go to Hong Kong, it's like a scene from a 1930s film in color of Hong Kong where everybody's eating noodles out of a bowl and with their chopsticks and they look like extras from a 1930s movie.
Does Eddie Griffin have a dog in any of this? Oh no, that was Armageddon. Never mind. That was Armageddon. I forgot.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I mean, and then Paris is destroyed and Hong Kong is destroyed. And this movie, a city is destroyed, but I think speaking to what you were talking about, really, since World War II, the American public had not seen, I mean, this did happen in Korea, like there were city fights in Korea. But really, since World War II, most of American conflicts, with the exception of a couple of things like in the Tet Offensive, the Battle of Hue, and that was made into the Stanley Kubrick film, Full Metal Jacket. And everybody actually said, wow, such an innovative film, because it was about urban combat, right? So we went many, many decades in America and didn't participate in or see modern urban combat. I mean, we would see other countries do it, but like until Iraq, that just wasn't the theater of war of the United States. And so I think, yeah, it did bring up this thing to watch Los Angeles, not just like Independence Day where just a bomb explodes and you see this huge, screen shot of the vista, right, of Los Angeles blanking out under a massive, or buildings tumbling over or something like that. But like you see, and by the way, this was shot in Louisiana to save money. They got a $15 million tax credit. So I was at LSU for 10 years. I did not recognize Baton Rouge in this movie. I did not know. When I went to see the movie, I did not know.
I feel the same way when I watch RoboCop. I'm like, this was supposed to be Dallas in the 80s. How did you get away with that? Or Total Recall in it Mexico City? It's like the same thing. I'm like, well, I don't see any of this like at all.
It is funny how in TV shows, the filmed in Canada ones were like, oh my gosh, the alien planet is Vancouver.
I know. So to say the X-Files is all of that, like more or less exclusively.
God bless Stargate, but like so many alien planets had beautiful, redwood and pine tree forests and that thing. But so yeah, I don't remember being exactly shocked by this film, but like, again, it tried to do something from the giganto shot of like LA is destroyed with a, huge alien bomb to like, you're fighting over a post office in Santa Monica.
I loved that, right?
Yeah.
Like
I like that.
And that, I really want to talk about the ending of the movie. I was probably most irritated by the ending of the movie than anything else. Cause the movie never got a sequel. And it stinks that it didn't get a sequel because this movie was successful enough financially to deserve a sequel. And there are so many movies that come out that are more successful than this movie that equally don't get sequels. But there are films that are less successful than this movie that has gotten sequels or a lot more time and effort spent on it. And if you're going to have this ending where it's like, well, they're going to go back out into the fight, like, man, I hate when movies call their shot like that and then it goes nowhere. Because as an audience, I'm like, man, was there another idea here that you were going to get to? Was this the primer for something more interesting and kind of novel in the next film? Because we've seen that before. We've seen where it's like the first film is just kind of a warm up for the second film because you got to get some people through the door in that first film. And then the second film, you can really rock them with the second punch. This movie, who knows what the second film would have been? It's a shame, but man, I really detested the ending of this movie for the singular reason of, well, these guys have somehow managed to figure out the alien threat completely, and now they're going to go back in and help everybody push them out. Like, I don't know if this story would be more interesting if the humans were able to push the aliens back at all. I don't even know if I care about what would happen post that, because it seems like the human beings are so outmatched in this movie that I couldn't believe they're able to push the aliens back other than with, human ingenuity. There's so much of that at Independence Day. It's almost like I don't even want that in 2011. I would prefer to see a film where we have the aliens win, ostensibly, quote unquote, or take over humanity, quote unquote. Again, we're watching a movie about a squad of guys fighting a global threat and force. I have no ability to believe they're going to be able to stop the threat completely. Because of Independence Day being the president of the United States and the kind of bombast given to that, kind of almost Shakespearean in the way that it presents the events, I can believe that. Because like you said, in Independence Day, it's just, there aren't a whole lot of people left from the cities that are being blown up because everybody's being torched. So I can believe the threat there. And, we have the nuke not blowing up the aliens in that film. The threat, even in that film, the threat is parity at the level with the importance of the characters. In this, it's like these characters should have no importance given to what they're doing because what they're doing is effectively nothing in terms of the actual invading force. I don't know, and you correct me if I'm wrong, maybe their story will be sung in the annals of human history as, the 300 of Thermopylae, something like that. But if you're going to do that, this story, they don't even get to that point with this story, unfortunately. Oh, yeah.
You really have to have a sound effect for when I go into professor mode,
and nails on the chalkboard like Quint from Jaws, stopping everyone in their tracks.
That'll build the audience, won't it? Yeah, nails on the chalkboard. I remember reading science fiction stories that played with an important question that will come up if we're ever invaded by aliens, which is that the assumption is that their levels of technology would be equivalent across everything, right? So the assumption of a lot of alien invasions, I'm thinking the day the Earth stood still, right? So these aliens, they cross the cosmos, billions of light years or whatever, and they have some sort of magnificent robot technology. They also have a magnificent, technology that could destroy the whole world if they want. So everything is sort of equivalent. But there have been some science fiction stories over the years, and I'm blanking on some of the exact details, but like I remember one of them, like, aliens invade, but all they have is gunpowder as weapons. Like they were really good at inventing like anti-grav drive and like time dilation, but they just didn't have wars, so they didn't really advance their military. Now, we have sort of kept like civilian and military technology have sort of kept up with each other, right? In our universe. So I did like it. The aliens didn't just show up with like one technology that wiped out humans. They may have variable technologies. Now you're talking about the ending. To me, there were 3 endings, and 2 of them could have been kept. The third they should have gotten rid of. The 3 endings were they defeat this alien mother communication ship. Like they knock it out, and that their command and control ship for the area, for like Santa Monica. And so
I
they're
just
able to
preface, I was fine with that part of it.
Yeah. So that could have been an ending. Like we won the Battle of Santa Monica, and this platoon was determinative of winning the Battle of Santa Monica. And that would have been roll credit, like, hey, high five, and like, thank you, everybody. And okay, that there could have been a sequel to that. Okay, so that was one ending. The other ending was they decide to go back into the battle because the Battle of Santa Monica is won, but there's other battles in like, Santa Ana and Thousand. I'm sorry, I'm losing my Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and the Battle of Beverly Hills, and so on. Okay, so that's okay. But the one where, and we've notified everybody in the world and now everybody knows how to destroy, that was way too Roland Emmerich, and that could have been cut. If in my edit, in my non-director's edit, I would have eliminated 1 or 2 of the endings. And that would have given them room for a sequel, by the way. So if they do a sequel based on that, I'm expecting both of us should get some, subsidiary rights or something like that. Chris, I can't hear you.
I guess I don't understand, if you're not going to make something like a sequel or something sequel adjacent, why you would even tease something like that. And again, maybe the expectation was that they were going to make a sequel. I don't know. Again, it seems like they were even working on a sequel as soon as 2012, the year after this film came out, but nothing ever coalesced. And so I think, yeah, it's, if I were making just the minorest fan edit of this movie, I would just probably have it cut to credits with them returning back to the base and then going back out, but no mention of like, oh, they can transmit this to everybody. Like, again, like, I guess, can you have one without the other? Can you have them blowing up that spaceship without them then being like, we're going to share this information with everybody else? Like, I guess that's what I wonder, because
I didn't understand what the clever like insight was. I'm imagining, the Serbian army fighting in Belgrade, right? And I think they would have already figured out, there's one ship or one alien construction that's bigger than the others. That might be the command and control. I didn't think necessarily we needed to tell anybody that. So it wasn't like Independence
Well, it was
Day
because it was interrupting the radio signal. Remember, they're flying over, and it's like
we know about radio signals. Like we interrupted, we tried to jam German radio signals in World War II. It wasn't like it was some secret of radio. Nobody knew about radio, or something. They should have gone there. It
felt too Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day.
Yeah. No, that would have been that Michelle Rodriguez. I like her character very much because she is a technician. And this is competence porn, okay? Like in some ways, like these people are good at their job. And I like that they had this communications technician who didn't pretend that she was, a super ninja warrior. She was really good at communications technology and helped in communications technology. And it helped engineer the problem, as they say in engineering and the military. So like, again, we'll send our notes to the studio. I hope they take them. But the film made more good decisions than bad decisions, I would say.
And I would agree. Going back and reading the kind of critical response to the film at the time, a lot of the kind of flack that the film gets is from the tropes and the trope heaviness of it. But, sitting here as an observer in 2026, 15 years, which is just insane in and of its own right, that this film has been out, we've seen a lot of war films since. We've seen Edge of Tomorrow. We've seen The Tomorrow War. Hell, we didn't even talk about this. We've seen a really terrible Independence Day sequel, like just mind-numbingly terrible. And again, another movie that by the end of it calls its own shot of like, well, we're going to go to the alien planet now. No, finance our third movie when this movie made no money. They made an Independence Day sequel in 2016, a decade, I believe, removed from the original film coming out. And yet they couldn't make a sequel to this film in the 5 years in between Independence Day coming out and this film coming out for real. I believe, I may be wrong, that Cowboys and Aliens, I think Cowboys and Aliens came out around the same time as this movie, if not the same year as this movie. Hell, it was the same year as this movie. What was the deal with 2011 Alien movies? Either, and that's the crazy thing. The budget for Cowboys and Aliens is $163 million. That movie has so many people in it, and it is directed by Jon Favreau. It might be like the one of two not great things that Jon Favreau has done. That and Zathura. But this movie had half of the budget and made 3 times as much money. And it made twice as much money as Cowboys and Aliens did. I just don't understand what happened to this movie as like a thing. Like you could have just taken this idea and just run with it and recast the entire movie. You don't even have to you could do this right now. There's nothing stopping you. You don't need Aaron Eckhart. I mean, I don't know if he's really doing anything, so he might be easy to go and hire. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what Aaron Eckhart's doing. He thinks making a movie with a dog, Muzzle 2, Streets of Fury or Rage or something. I'm not even joking. There's a movie called Muzzle starring Aaron Eckhart. Maybe that's what we should watch next. I'm joking. I don't know. It's just very weird. Like for me, I don't feel like this movie is as bad as the critics in 2011 felt it would be. And I think if they revisited this movie now, they might actually have a more nuanced take other than that the war tropes are overwhelming. Like, yeah, but there's not a whole lot of movies like this one. And it's kind of a shame that there isn't, because this movie ultimately, even if it doesn't succeed all the way, it does have more to say than your average big blockbuster war movie does.
I'd say that if I were like grading the film, I would probably, it had one too many, but it should get credit for the tropes that it didn't use.
Right.
Films which get much better ratings and have much more bigger budget and bigger box office stars and things like that. Shamelessly,
and nobody says anything.
And even get credit for them, where it's painful to watch, right? This is not a painful to watch movie. I think the special effects have stood up. You cannot look at this film and go like, yeah, that was 2011. It's better than these alien combats are better than a lot of $300 million movies or TV shows that I'm forced to watch now.
Well, and I would say the other thing that definitely works in the film's favor is it's not over edited either, which is the other thing that now, you can't help but watch a movie and there's like 30 cuts in one scene and it's, whiplash where you're watching it, trying to figure out what's going on as much as what you're seeing because the director is, hopped up on Ritalin or something. It's like, it's just, this movie exists in a time and a place where they weren't doing that as commonplace, like this is the way things are. We're still right before that. I mean, this is just before that becomes kind of like the thing that everybody does, at least in big budget action movies. And this movie doesn't have any of that. Like, I think this is a big budget action war movie of a different era and time. And I do miss it because, to your point, like, it still holds up as a big budget sci-fi blockbuster movie, and the special effects look good, the practical effects look good. It's a well-made, well-shot, well-edited movie. Does it lean into some tropes that I wish it didn't? Sure. But you know what? There's not a whole lot of other Aaron Eckhart fighting aliens on the street of LA movies to go and watch, so I guess if I want to watch one, it's going to be this one. And I don't know, for some reason this movie does kind of exist in this weird liminal space in my mind of like, this is a movie I saw in theaters at a very weird time in my life that I just remember. And now I've watched it again. And yeah, there's better, there's worse, but I think this occupies the upper average area. I would give this like a B-. And you know what? The ability to mesh the two genres together is probably where you're getting most of the grade from, but I'm not going to tell you that. So, hey, sometimes it's the effort, right? Sometimes the effort is impressive alone. And the effort here, I think, is impressive. Do they land the finish? No, but rarely does every movie need to be a 10. For God's sakes, come on. You can enjoy an 8 or a 7. You know, it's not going to change your life, but not every movie has. If you want to see hear Dr. Perlmutter and I talk about cinema that is, different than this one, I won't say better or worse, head on over to weirdingwaymedia.com, where subjectivity is less important than objectivity. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the case. Well, it depends on what we're talking. And when Dr. Perlmutter and I are talking, we're often talking about cinema that is worth watching or possibly even required viewing, which when he and I start talking in the future about loftier films, possibly that those films may be under a subheading on the RSS feed for all of you looking to find those films specifically, because, hey, I'm not saying Mickey 17 or Battle Los Angeles aren't conquering the human experience in some way, but I get the distinct feeling a lot of the other films we're going to talk about may speak to headier tones than blowing up aliens in the streets of Los Angeles. So keep an eye out for that. But for everything else, like, rate, and review this wherever you're getting it. If it's on iTunes, give us a follow and a rating. If it's on YouTube, subscribe or follow everywhere else. And if it's on Spotify, leave a star rating. Those all things help us out, so do them on the respective platforms. Dr. Perlmutter, thank you so much for joining me as always and bringing this film back into my personal consciousness. I always appreciate the candor and the conversation and the picks. You know, even if it's bad, which none of these have been bad. So,
thank you, Chris, and I appreciate your commitment to color.
and as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.